failure, right? I have to say it like that, failure. That was like, come on. It was like, honestly scarier though, scarier. Like if you're in the middle of like a dark room and I hear failure, I'd be like, ooh, that's way scarier than failure. Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit here. So the fear of failure is predicated on a lot. A lot of things go into this idea because we all have expectations. You can have expectations if you're a spouse, right? I'm sure that we all have communicated to our significant other what time we need to be home tonight, if their dinner's going to be home or if it's going to be out. We have expectations as a child to our parents. What does that holiday plan look like? What did we communicate that we were going to do this year? We have expectations potentially as a parent where those kids expect to get clothes or food or a bed to sleep in, right? Those are expectations that are put on us. We also hope to have clear expectations as employees so that we know what's a good performance, what's a bad performance. But with expectations comes the appropriate and very necessary realization that it's possible to mess up. It's possible to make a mistake. And there's a large piece of us that really wants to distance ourselves from the idea of failure. Okay? For some reason, this is almost a buzzword in our society, and it's really difficult to separate these two thoughts. I failed, and I am a failure. It's really difficult to separate I failed and I am a failure. One is a label, one is something that just happened. We're going to walk through some practical steps on how to do that today. And I'll tell you one thing right now, guys. This iPad, it's failing me right now because it wants to go to sleep, and I don't want it to. Stay awake, iPad. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this first, which is, what's WSIC stand for? Why should you care? Let me tell you why. Because this may be the only thing holding you back from improvement. Because even if you're going to do like we did last week, which was what we focused on our strengths, you're going to get to the point where you come to a limit or a maximum or a spot where like, I've never done this before, even though this is something I like doing and I'm having difficulty with it, and I potentially might mess up or even fail. Okay? So, we talked about expectations, but this is Jalen Hurts in high school. I don't know if you knew his statistics in high school, but I'm going to read some of them to you because they are quite impressive. In high school, he passed for 6,400 yards. That's almost 200 yards a game. And then he ran for 2,600 yards. So he's the quarterback, not the running back. 2,600 yards as a running back is pretty good, but 2,600 yards as a quarterback is phenomenal. That means you would have to pass for about 54 yards a game, every game your entire high school career. And he had 112 touchdowns. So obviously, they got some college looks. And as you all probably know a little bit of the story, he was one of the primary quarterbacks at the University of Alabama until the national title game. And there was a little switcheroo because he wasn't having a great game. And we're going to talk about how he responded to that. So, the first things first, let's define failure. So, I'm going to recommend today that we take our definition of it and instead of separating it from us, let's bring it closer to us to make it less negative. So, some would say that a mistake is failure. Some would say that like failing a test is ultimate failure. Some would say that if I missed a KPI, that's failure. I don't care what you define failure as, but what I would recommend that you do is bring it closer to you instead of separating. Our natural tendency is to say, I messed up, but I didn't fail. Or I didn't get that right, but I didn't completely drop the ball and fail here. Like, I don't think we need to use the word failure. I don't think we need to use the word completely lost it, right? We want to just say, it was a mistake. It's not really a reflection of what I did or who I am, which is appropriate, but we often want to distance ourselves from the word because we don't like it or we don't want to even admit it. So how do we understand how to embrace it. First, understanding what it's not. So I want you to write these down if you're taking notes. So failure is not avoidable. Guess what? Everyone fails. I know. Ugh. Even if you've never failed a test before, even if you were top of your class, everyone eventually fails. And I would even submit to you that if you've never failed anything before, it's going to be harder for you to walk through failure. One of the questions I always ask in an interview, if I'm participating in your interview, is name a time that you failed or messed up. And what I'm looking for is if you can recognize where you made a mistake and what you learned from it. I once interviewed an accountant who surprisingly doesn't work here. And I asked this accountant, when is a time that you failed or messed up? And they said, I've never messed up. What? She's like, you don't understand. If you're an accountant, you can't make a mistake. And I said, no, I totally get it. Like, numbers are important, spreadsheets, huge fan myself. But certainly there's been a time that you put the wrong formula in the spreadsheet. Something went south. Never. Okay, let's just rewind the clock a little bit. Like, did you ever mess up in school or turn a paper in late? I've never failed. My, wow. I said, I really don't believe. So I kind of pushed it a little bit. Because if people are willing to go to the mat, I'll go to the mat too. We all know this. Yeah. I'm like, how crazy you want to get? So I said, really, is there? So I pushed her a little bit, and she says, okay, one time, yes, I did mess up. This is a true story. This actually was said to me out loud. One time I was working at Radio Shack. Anybody here know what Radio Shack is? Yeah. There we go. Excellent. Great store, no longer in business. There are a couple. She's working at Radio Shack. A gunman came into the store with a gun and held her up at gunpoint and said, give me your money. In that situation, you know what I would have done? Here is my money. This is not worth any of this violence. I'm not being paid enough to defend this store. Nor even if I was, I wouldn't. And she said, I failed because I gave him the money. I said, I disagree with you. I think you did. I said, out of everything in your life, this is probably one of the moments you succeeded. My point I'm trying to make is that it is impossible to not experience failure. And if you are committed to the idea that you've never failed or that failure is ultimately a bad thing, that's the response you're going to give. And that I've never failed. Failure is bad, and I am so distant from it. It's like oil and water. I can't be. No, I'm going to stick with it. I appreciate it, though. But it's going to happen. Number 2, failure is not binary. It is not a fail or succeed. It's not fail or succeed, because where you are, take anything. It could be learning how to do a spreadsheet. It could be learning how to run a coffee shop. It could be learning how to do collections. It could be checking someone in. It could be becoming the best nurse practitioner in ENT. It could be running a department. It could be anything. There are going to be moments in that situation that it doesn't go well. And someone from the outside might look at you and go, I think we're having a little failure moment, aren't we? And that is your choice to make. You can decide what this moment is. And if you take failure as a negative and assign it to the moment, you're going to get an end result. I'm a failure. This is bad. Or, yeah, I'm not necessarily, or in the positive light, yeah, I'm not necessarily getting it, but I'm on a journey. I'm on my way. It may not be perfect right now. My metrics might all be red, but just wait a couple months, wait a couple weeks, wait a couple years. They're going to be green, because all of these are stepping stones to the next phase. I'm embracing the fact that, yeah, it's red. Okay? So are sunsets, right? You can use that next time you're in a meeting, I promise. It won't work, though. There's freedom in the failure if you're willing to embrace it, to say, this isn't a binary end. This is the point where I turn it around. This is the point where I start to make a difference. This is the point where I learn from that. It's not a if or. It could be right now, but it's not always. Failure's not objective. That's a hard one to really come to terms with. Because a lot of times you're going to be looking at a spreadsheet, or you're going to be faced with a number, or you're going to be told by a supervisor, hey, you failed here. That's going to feel really objective. This feels objective. You get to decide if in your mind this is the appropriate moment to embrace failure. Is this a failure? If failure is bad, and I say, no, it's subjective, you're in denial. If failure's good and you embrace it, yeah, I did mess that up. But that's not the end. This is a spectrum. This is not an objective if or and. This is a point in time in which it didn't go well, but this whole category of things. Take some set of orders. Let's say we're tracking orders for a week, and they're not in the right metric, or the metrics aren't where they need to be. It's not objective if I say, hey, you're not doing it right, good job. Okay, yeah, today, this week, it's not where it needs to be, but next week it's going to be, because this isn't objective. This is subjective, and it's going to get to where I want it to get to. I'm willing to embrace it in the moment to understand these are the things we haven't done right, and now we're going to get to what we can do well. This is a big one. Failure is not the enemy. Failure is not the enemy. Like how I said enemy there? Enemy. I'm really emphasizing it so you can remember it. It's a speech tactic. A lot of people have this quote. Jalen Hurts has said it many times. You can either win or you can learn. That's right. If you don't win, that is often our best educator. If you think of a moment in your life when you had the best lessons, it's oftentimes where things didn't go great. Shoot, I messed that up. I really learned what to do there. If you step into a season of life and things go well, right, you're probably not doing a bunch of learning. You're probably just guessing a bunch and you're getting it right. It's not until you start to bump into the failure rope where you realize, okay, now I need to reassess, decide what I need to do, decide how this can be better. It's not the enemy. It's the stepping stone of success. And this is a big one because a lot of people have been dealing with this for a long time. That failure is not a label. Spend some time on this for just a second. There is a significant, what's a good word for this? There's a significant stigma in our current culture, society, from ages, I would say, 45 and younger, in which if I am failed something, or if I have messed something up, or if I tried something and I didn't go the way I told everyone it was going to go, that I am a failure. And that label can stick with you your whole life. So much so that this is how it presents. I just do this because I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I just became this job because it's all I thought I could do. And if you really think through, search your own mind, there was probably a moment in life where somebody, potentially not even on purpose, said, you don't have what it takes to be this. Or you don't have the skill set to accomplish this. And here's the sad part about it. Most of the time, the person that said it was trying to do it out of a good place. Like, hey, like, listen, brother, or listen, sister, love your heart here, love what you're trying to do, but maybe not the best choice. Maybe think about this, because look at all these evidence. I mean, like, you've messed it up 25 times, or your grades aren't where they need to be. I don't know if I would apply to that educational program, or, look at the choices you've made in life. You've got all this excess baggage. I just don't know if this is the right career path. I don't know if this is the right choice. I don't know if this is the right relationship. No one is in charge of that label except for you. You get to decide what you're made for. You get to decide what you're going to do. You get to decide what you're capable of. And a lot of times we live in a self-limiting philosophy because of these labels that have been created for us subconsciously, that you, let's say, get a promotion, or you have a great day at work, or things go great at home, or you have a great season with your spouse or a great season with your kids, and you start to step into this extra level of things are going great, and your brain goes, you're not great. Come on back down. and you start to focus on the negatives in life. You start to say, well, yeah, it's going great with my spouse, but things are really crappy at work. Or yeah, it's going great at work, but things are really terrible at home. So you start to self-limit. You start to pull yourself back down because someone, again, most probably not because they're even being mean, at one point said something in passing, and now you're saying it to yourself all the time. You're not good enough. So don't even try to do that. And I'm here to tell you, we're breaking that today. We're moving away from that because failure is not a label. It's an event. It is not who you are. If you got it, say got it.
Got it.
Love it. Finally, failure's not final. And a lot of people will feel like failure is final because they'll try something one time, didn't go great, and I'm not trying that again. I used to be a water ski instructor between summers in college, and I would go down to the lake. And here was the difference between those who could get up on behind the boat and those who could not get up behind the boat. We know what the number one predictor is. The number one predictor was who would try more than once. So if I couldn't get them up for like 2 or 3 seconds behind the boat the first time they were in the water, the likelihood of them getting up was like 0. So most of the time you go out on the boat and there would be like 5 or 6 kids. And most of the time we were training kids, young adults, even sometimes adults. And the way it would work is you guys know what a boom is? It sits on the side of the boat. It's a big pole, you hold on to it, and I can coach somebody as they're trying to get up when they ski. We will give you as many times as you want to try to get up. Most people, it's somewhere between 5 and 15 times to get up behind the boat, right? And my dad and I would be the ones coaching people, and we would say the same thing. Knees bent, arms straight, let the boat pull you up. Knees bent, arms straight, let the boat pull you up. Knees bent, arms straight, let the boat pull you up. But every time, knees, legs straight, all the way over. That's okay. Hey, we're here to learn. If somebody would get frustrated after trying and trying and trying and trying and start to adopt the mindset, I'm not going to get through this, I'm going to get in the boat, the likelihood was nilo. And I would get out there with them and I'd say, look, if you can just get up for 3 seconds, I promise you, you're going to figure this out. And I promise 99.9% of the time, if you got back in that boat before getting up for those 3 seconds, you weren't making it. The same is true in everything we pursue. If you give up and you decide that what we've tried, I didn't make it, the likelihood of you getting back in the boat, getting out of the boat and getting in the water again is about 0. So we have to embrace failure as just a moment. It's not the end. Look at Jalen Hurts. Guy got benched in the national championship game, right? Boom. That was his face, right? National championship game, what year was this? Come on, Alabama fans, help me out. Oh my gosh, thank you. 2018. Woo, thought I was in Georgia for a second. 2018. Yeah, cool. So gets benched, and they put somebody else in, come back, win the game. Had a moment. Look at his face. Could have said, I'm done. Could have said, I don't want to do this anymore. Could have said, this isn't for me. Decided to put a transfer in. He decided to redefine failure. He decided to say, hey, I might not be good enough for right now. I might not be what this team needs right now. Could have pulled all the way out and stopped playing football in general, but decided instead, you know what? I think there's another opportunity. So sometimes what some would call failure may not be what you call failure. Some would say leaving Alabama was failure. Some would say, hey, stepping away from that's quitting. Not to Jalen Hurts. He decided that his definition of success was moving forward into a different position. And eventually applying for the NFL draft. Does anybody know who this is? If you do, I'd be really impressed. So this is Maurice Clarett, one of the best freshman running backs in college history. He rushed for 1,237 yards in a single season. That's almost over 100 yards a game, 18 touchdowns. He led Ohio State to a 14-0 record in the BCS championship in 2002. Made a little mistake. Had to sit out a year after the draft and never got back on track. Made a mistake, got back in the boat, one of the best college freshmen of all time, was eligible for the draft year 2, made one mistake, got back in the boat, and never got back out again. Could have been one of the best players in NFL history. Jamarcus Russell, anybody ever heard of this guy? I'm not surprised you haven't. Russell played a 21-4 record as a starter for LSU. He was named the MVP of the Sugar Bowl in 2007. He capped the season with a 67.8% reception percentage. He was 6'5", 265 pounds, and could throw a football faster than any quarterback during his time. He was a number 1 pick by the Raiders in 2007. Number 1 pick in the NFL draft. After a lengthy holdout, after he got to training camp, after he became in a different position, got a little uncomfortable, got a little nervous, decided he couldn't make it, decided he couldn't cut it, fell back, never got out of training camp. Recently he was interviewed at the age of 30 and said that he would play for free if somebody would give him another chance. Failed, decided it was final, and now you've never heard of these guys. Jalen had the same opportunity. Could have said, I tried, I made it to the top, I was great in high school, could have not recovered, but decided to. So how do we process it? How do we process it? Don't say it like that. How do we process it? Number 1, we're going to reject rejection, right? If we grow our strengths, if we focus on strengths, we're going to get to the point where somebody says to us, you didn't do a good job. Or we're faced with that ourselves and have to embrace this idea of I just failed, or it didn't go the way I wanted it to. But you've got to commit to understanding that's not who you are. We're going to reject rejection. Number 2, we're going to see failure as temporary. It's only going to last as long as it takes us to own it. Let me say what I mean by that. Think about the last time someone said to you, you messed up. And it was a time that you didn't agree with the evaluation. Okay? I'll give you an example. Most people in a clinical setting, if they're faced with a clinical problem that they messed up on, charting, coding, documentation, check-in process, whatever. Hey, so-and-so, you didn't document this right. Oh, I didn't. Objective. Thank you for that feedback. I'll try better next time. Most people accept that pretty well. Do a good job with that. Most people have a really difficult time with getting feedback up for an attitudinal issue. Hey, attitude's not where it needs to be. Whoa, you're going out my core identity here. Wait a minute. Hold up there for a second. I don't like what you're saying. Because now, I have to see failure differently. It's really easy from a work performance or from a execution performance, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, for me to separate that. When I start to get evaluation on my attitude or my identity, not necessarily who I am as a human being, but how I behave, it starts to challenge my core identity, and then it's harder to adopt failure. And so a lot of times, we don't see failure as temporary because we inappropriately assume that we don't have a place to grow within ourselves. Okay? So if I have an attitudinal adjustment to make, and I limit myself by saying, I don't agree with you. I don't own the problem. And now that failure is just me battling in my own mind. When so-and-so said that to me, they were wrong. When so-and-so, they were out of line. That's ridiculous that I should have to do that. That's not appropriate that I should have to do that. When ultimately the person that's giving you that feedback is looking for your best. That is when failure doesn't become temporary. It becomes permanent. Because we're always now arguing with the argument instead of the actual assessment. See failure as isolated incidents. Just because you messed one thing up, this is kind of very similar to what we talked about last week, doesn't mean you're going to mess everything up. Especially when it's something new. Okay? So maybe I'm going to try something I haven't done before. I'm going to step into leadership. Okay, I'm new to this leadership thing. Let's try communication. Failed. Ugh. I'm not bad at everything. I just messed up communication. Okay, let's try setting priorities. Ooh, messed that up. Shoot. Let's try vision casting. Oh, I'm good at this. You're going to have different levels of acumen for everything you step into. Just because maybe communication didn't go well, vision casting didn't go well, some type of priority setting didn't go well, doesn't mean that all things are not going to go well. Failure are isolated incidents. This is a tough one. Keep expectations realistic. When you step into something new, or you start to grow into your things that you're already strong at, or your predisposition to doing a good job at it, can be really easy to expect that it's going to go fantastic, right? I tried this. It's going to go great. I'm not going to have any mistakes. I'm not going to have any problems. When setbacks happen, that's the first time. That's typical outcomes, typical to what we can expect when we try something new. And oftentimes we can have an expectation on ourselves that, hey, I don't make mistakes. I don't make failures, even if it's subconscious. All right, I've seen all these patients in the past. I'm going to try seeing this new patient. It's going to go just like all the others did. Maybe not. It might go south. It might go poorly. And if I reframe my expectation for failure, when that happens, my expectations are realistic. And lastly, but not least, bounce back stronger. The only way to stop fearing failure is to walk through it, embrace it. If we can't get to the point where we're faced with our own lack or failure, we're never going to get better from it. We'll continually say, you know what? I don't agree with anything you're saying. Or I reject that. Or I didn't really mess that up. It's not as much of a big deal as you think it is. We've got to get good at saying thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for that expectation. Thank you for that perspective. And now I'm going to get better from it because it's not who I am. It's just what I did. Or it's just what happened. That doesn't define me. And it's the opportunity to grow. Anybody know what this picture is?
That's when they lost the Chiefs.
That's right. So, Hurts, drafted, gets to the Super Bowl, loses. Another perfect opportunity to quit. To say, you know what? I made it this far. This is good enough. But he had a vision in mind. He had a destination where he wanted to go. He wasn't going to let this failure be final. It's easy to quit when we feel like we want to control the situation. But failure is typically just the beginning. A lot of times, if things are going south, especially professionally, the only thing we think we can control is our effort. And we'll just recluse. And have you heard of quiet quitting? Have you heard this term yet? Quiet quitting is like, I'm going to stop putting in maximal effort because I don't think I'm good enough. And most of the time, that's reaching back to that label that was put on you. I am not good enough. I'm not going to figure this out. I'm not going to get better. I'm never going to fix that thing. Because fixing that thing is admitting some type of a failure. And I'm not willing to do that. So, what happened this year? He decided that they were going to win. I don't know if anybody's heard this story, but in 2022, after they lost the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts sat in the locker room in like silence after everybody left, after all the reporters got out of the locker room. I don't even know if he went to the press conference. Everybody cleared out. It was like hours after, like people were like, hey man, like you got to go. Super Bowl's over. Wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't say a word. Finally, one of the assistant coaches comes up to him and says, hey man, like it's time to clear out. What's going on with you? And the only thing he said was, I will be back here and I will win next time. So in the moment of the deepest part of the failure, the moment where I did all of this work, I transferred, I never gave up, I pushed it, I got drafted, I worked hard, I had a record-setting season, and I fell short. The time when you're like, goodness gracious, I'm just going to throw my arms up, I'm done. He said, the first thing out of his mouth was, I'm not going to get out of the water. I'm going to stay here until I get up. And that's what it takes to have a comeback. We've got to turn our setbacks into comebacks because that's how we learn. We can't be afraid of labeling it a setback or labeling it a deficiency because those are oftentimes the first step to improvement. So I want you to think about this for just a second. Everybody close your eyes. This is really important. You can fall asleep if you want to, but this has the potential to become a sentinel moment for some of you. And I want you to think about what we talked about, which was, is there a time in life when somebody said something to you that maybe it wasn't even mean? Maybe it was good-hearted. It was a parent, it was a coach, a teacher, a sibling, a cousin, a mentor, and they said something to you that at the time they felt like it was out of the goodness of their heart, but they said, hey, like, you're just not made for that. That's not you. That's not really what you're made for. And think about how that if something comes to your mind quickly, then that's it. Think about that phrase. Think about that moment. Maybe you had an idea of what you wanted to do and somebody else had something other idea. And I want you to picture yourself standing in front of them and facing them when they said that phrase. And then I want you in your mind, you're not going to do this physically, you're just going to do this in your mind, you're going to turn 180 degrees away from them. And then you're going to turn back to them, and you're going to say this 3 times. You're going to look at them, and you're going to say, that is you. And then you're going to turn around and say, but this is me. Don't say it out loud, say it in your head. We're going to do that 3 times. You're going to turn back to them. That was you. And you're going to turn away. This is me. And in front of you is nothing but potential. In front of you is what you have planned for your life. In front of you is what you think you can do. You're going to turn back to them, and one more time, you're going to say it even louder in your head. That was you. You're going to turn away from them, focused on the future, and say, this is me. And sit in that moment. Sit in that potential for just a second. Excellent. Open your eyes. So this is what I want you to take away from this today. These are the key moments here. I want you to know that failure is a process. Everybody's going to have to go through it. It is not a punishment. It does not define who you are. Your response does. I'm not taking this off. I'm going to let you take all the time in the world to write it down. Every setback is a lesson. It's not a loss. And we use setbacks as set-ups for comebacks. I'm going to tell you a story. How many people know who Adam Sandler is? Everybody in here probably. Adam Sandler was an acting student at an acting college in his early 20s. And toward the end of his college days, one of his acting professors took him out to get a drink. And they sat down for a beer. And they were talking about school. They were talking about his plans. And the acting professor looks at him and says, listen, man, I really think you're a great guy. I just don't think acting is for you. And I don't want to see you disappoint yourself. I don't want to see you fail. I don't want to see you mess up. And I've seen a lot of students come through here, and I just don't think this is for you. Adam Sandler obviously internalizes that information and decides to ignore it, thank goodness, and goes and makes has a great Hollywood career. Makes it on Saturday Night Live, and then has a successful movie career. Well, 20, 30 years later, he bumps in to this professor while they are out at with friends or something like that. And in that moment, he's got all these kind of Hollywood elites around him, and they walk up with this professor who he had in college. And it's this moment that, most people would be waiting for, right? Like, this is the guy that told me I wasn't going to make it. Look what I've done. You're welcome, right? So he calls all his friends over. He says, hey guys, I want to introduce you to somebody. And the professor's kind of like, ooh. And he's like, I want you guys to meet the first professor ever to buy me a beer. And in that moment, you can tell that it made no difference to him what that person had said. Because he decided that it wasn't going to define his future. That setback wasn't a failure. That he was in control of what the outcome was going to be. So, here's the question I have for you today. And I'm going to kick it to you, Lawrenceburg, kick it to you guys at home. And then after this, where's Ashley? There she is. I'm going to have you come up here and dismiss us. But I want you to think, what's on the other side of failure let's probably say of the failure, that you're unwilling to admit. So what's on the other side of that thing that you're saying, it's not that bad. I don't need to address it. I'm not asking you to admit the failure. I'm asking you to ask yourself, if you were to admit it, what would be the improvement that you would see? What would be the change that you could potentially notice? And Blaze's beautiful graphic. And then